Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the last webinar of the Clubhouse Development webinar series. Today, we're going to be discussing the importance of stewardship. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, you can use the GoToWebinar tool, and we'll make sure to review those before we sign off. Introduce you to who we are. Cogeo is the leading expert of the sports nonprofit industry. Our management team has 7 years of fundraising experience and has raised over $750 million for more than 200 nonprofits. One of the key reasons that we're passionate about working with soccer organizations and soccer clubs like yourselves is that our leadership has both played and coached the game. And that includes your speaker today, Rob Cusell. As a college All-American and highly successful soccer coach, Rob is the managing director of consulting services at Cogeo and has helped hundreds of sports organizations implement strong organizational development and fundraising strategies. And with that, I'll pass it to you, Rob.
Thank you, Mel. Hello, everyone. So as Mel pointed out, slide number 3 shows us that this is the final of the webinar, and probably the most important, assuming you're doing some of the other stuff. So let's look at slide 4. So stewardship essentially is the beginning of the roof, right? So it covers all of the rooms. And today we'll look at how stewardship is done in each of the rooms, because there are particular things that should be done around that. And it's also the catalyst toward a transformational gift. In other words, because the club, the agency has done good stewardship practices, it can lead to big investments. So the next slide, what are the goals for today? Give you some context. We're going to define stewardship. We're going to talk about its relevance tactically within each room, as I just mentioned. Readiness, which is understanding and evaluate your current practices in all fundraising and sponsorship areas. How clean and organized data systems are, again, vital for doing effective stewardship. And that's the good news, because data has transformed the ability to do effective stewardship. So the next slide, let's define it. So what is stewardship? It's the acts performed by a club with a donor after a donor or a sponsor has contributed to an organization that aim to indirectly or directly validate the purpose for the contribution, as well as promote the likelihood of additional contribution sponsorships from the donor, whether it's a high net worth individual, government, foundation, or a business. Moves management. That's a series of intentional donor-centric moves to keep a donor invested in an agency over time. And we'll talk specifically about some of those issues. So let's start that and start with the bottom left of the house, the clubhouse, with annual and membership giving. And this is retail, right? Generally speaking, a lot of this is done online now. And many of the systems have auto-generate emails, which self-populate, that can be customized. And that's enough, because the FBIN number is generally listed. And if you don't have that, then you do need to send them a formal thank you on a piece of paper. So what is it in terms of annual? You should definitely have a formal acknowledgement from the club, from the agency, again, with the federal exempt ID number. And then as needed, have additional acknowledgements, particularly if board members or other coaches know the donor as a parent or a business. You want to provide agency updates through newsletters, blogs, updates. Right now, we're doing a lot of asking on behalf of our clubs because it's year-end appeals, and we're doing a lot of storytelling within newsletters. And that can be done digitally now. Video and photos are very effective to make sure that people understand the value of the program and what's going to happen with the monies that are raised. All this can be done on the website today. You're going to alter your social media content to do some asking tactically. and then building out annual reports to demonstrate the breadth of giving within the club. And that's generally done after 4 or 5 years. If you haven't started fundraising yet, that's when we start that process. So the next slide, number 8, is your basic thank you letter. This is from the San Francisco United Foundation. These are the board chair and vice chair, Willie and Dee Dee. And it's just simple. Thank you. Your gift will be instrumental in making a real difference in our community. Grateful for your involvement. And then the last paragraph is really looking forward to periodically updating you on the impact of your gift and the successes. And that's basically telling them, hey, we're going to be in touch. We're going to steward this. There'll be moves management. Expect to hear from us. So it doesn't have to be fancy for annual giving, but it should be done, and it should be from the right people. If you do an event, then you've got 3 levels of stewardship. You've got the pre-event stewardship, an in-event stewardship, and then a post-event stewardship, right? And what are these events? Well, they could be a gala, they could be a walkathon, they could be a soccer-thon, it could be a juggling contest, it could be a virtual event, cultivation event. We see golf outings that are volunteer run. Anyway, anything. So pre-event, as you're acquiring stuff for the event, whether it's lots or silent auction lots or raffle items, etc., you should have, as you get these, you should thank the businesses or whomever is giving you the actual lot or raffle item immediately. And that's really a best business practice. During the event, you should recognize anybody who was a sponsor or donor in an event guide and then signage at the event. And then post-event, everybody who participated, including volunteers, donors, everyone should get a thank you describing the event and the success and what happened, how much money was raised, and then making sure that if they are major donors to the event, to steward them on a quarterly basis, give them updates on what their money's doing. So the next is a sample of a letter that went out after the soccer-thon. So this is exactly what I was just talking about in terms of messaging. So this soccer-thon was, if I remember correctly, in August, I think, or July. And it was their first annual, so we helped them do this, and they raised over $75,000 in a day. And here they're going to allocate to financial aid assistance, so scholarships, and then they're renovating the Seminole Soccer Complex. So there'll be some allocation to there as well. There was some allocation there as well. And then they recognize the lead volunteer, Meg, who did an incredible job. And then their last paragraph, grateful to everybody who participated, event players, donors, parents, volunteers, as well as corporate sponsors. And then look forward to our second annual. So I guess it was in February. David Durr, who's a new executive director at OCYS. And they changed their name, actually, the club. So yeah, that's a good one because it gives a nice rundown where the money's going, how much was raised, which is significant, real money. Third room. So ironically, stewarding corporations, businesses, and foundations, very similar. This is really important that you do this, particularly with foundations, because they're in the business of giving away money, and you're not the only people they're giving money to, and they'll be giving it to other agencies who are also doing steward. So if you can differentiate yourself and really steward it well, it'll really help for future funding from that same foundation. And for businesses, again, if they're giving away money, they're doing it for a reason, right? By associating with your club, they're going to be seen as doing good in the community. Here in Richmond, Virginia, there's the Strikers have a ton of sponsors. Many of them are retail, definitely medical, as well as insurance and real estate. And you see signage at Stryker Park and any of their facilities. So it's really important that they really steward them, which I know they do. So what does that look like? because these are generally larger contributions, definitely get them on a quarterly, which is to say you divide the annual contribution by 4. So if they do a sponsorship for $10,000, you report every quarter on what $2,500 did in the area that they're interested. So you want to do that quarterly moves management. Definitely talk about how the funds were leveraged, and then success stories. Tell stories about results from the application of the funds. Let's say they name a field, right? Well, hey, good news. This quarter, so many games were played. This tournament took place. You got significant visibility on Got Soccer because we've renamed the field, and et cetera. You want to communicate to them any significant milestones, particularly if, let's say they want to name one of the fields in a new facility. Well, you keep them up to date on how that development is going, if it's a new facility build up, for example. And make sure you meet any contractual obligations as it relates to sponsorship and how you're going to integrate that sponsorship. We've got a ton of templates if you're ever interested. Because it's getting more complex with all this digital, right? Because there's really 2 things now. It's eyeballs, right? As well as push-pull, which is digital visibility by association. And we're doing a lot of these deals right now around that. And then demographics reached. They're very interested in that. We just did a sponsorship for one of the larger governing bodies in the country out on the West Coast. And we were talking to a wealth manager and his company. And we explained to him that we could actually slice and dice all of their membership, 130,000 families, according to demographics, net worth, as well as where they lived. And to him, that was absolutely incredible. And so he had no problem seriously considering a long-term partnership. So metrics are key in terms of how many impressions, facility visits for eyeballs, anything that has to do with metrics on social media, and foot traffic if you actually have a complex and you're doing tournaments. So the next slide is again going out to a business that supports and really talks about data, right? The leadership journey has 37 girls, 32 boys, 20 students of color, 10 girls, 10 boys, evenly matched. And this is what really interested this business, which is that they grow diversity and that they have an impact to make sure that disadvantaged kids have access. And this is the Olympic Club Foundation, which is a San Francisco-based foundation. And again, I think they gave them $10,000. So this is what we're stewarding here on a quarterly basis. And again, it's all metrics. For major donors, so these are wealthy families who give to the club. We see it all the time. It's the same concept, a little more personal, obviously. And you're going to do it with people who have relationships with the family. But same concept. If they give $5,000 or $500, it's $125 that gets stewarded every quarter. Very donor-centric. How did you leverage the funds? And again, success stories. So again, it's very, very. Now, the only differentiator here is whenever we go to work with a client, we impose the facilitation of a case statement. And you've heard this if you've been on previous webinars, many examples of which can be found on our website. And a case statement really is telling the story of what it is you're fundraising against for major donors. This is a group out of Oakland. And again, it's a forum, major gift, thank you, April 2020. And contribution enabled to do this, 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 and this. And then again, identify virtual opportunities, safely provide. Here, they're essentially saying, hey, well, a month and a half in the pandemic, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that our programs are not impacted. And they weren't. So again, it's very straightforward, really talking about impact. Capital campaigns, again, those happen whenever you're doing a build out or a renovation, futsal, anything that's infrastructure related for the most part. And right now we're doing a lot of this kind of work around the country. Futsal to renovating facilities to building out a facility from scratch in Oregon. And we're being very creative in terms of how we're leveraging funds. The American Rescue Plan, which you may have heard of, it's a big deal for both, well, I should say all state, city, and counties were allocated quite a lot of money. And that's been quite the boon for some of our clients in Maryland and Missouri and now in Oregon. And we're talking millions of dollars. Again, the American Rescue Plan, which is a really good thing to look into, particularly if you're doing a build out. That's going to increase the economy locally. And that's really the pitch there. We're looking at that also in Northern California for futsal courts in Alameda County and other things like that. But generally speaking, it's for clubs, it's a build out. They're not really thinking about building out reserves and endowments at this juncture. We haven't run into that yet. There needs to be a naming right portfolio, definitely a donor wall recognition for anybody who gave to the campaign at whatever level, and then constant campaign communications to donor as they give to the campaign. Explain what the incremental dollars are raised toward the goal. Have a campaign kickoff event where you invite all and any prospects, city, government people. Make sure you're promoting any significant funders to the campaign that don't want to be anonymous. Make sure that you're communicating the completion of campaign phases, because generally it's not all done at once. It's phased out in terms of the build outs. Groundbreaking event for sure if it's a new facility, as well as a campaign closure celebration event once you're done with the campaign. In terms of post-campaign stewardship, generally speaking, it's biannual, twice a year. You want to give an update, a special update as that campaign donor. So that's that. They continue to consider giving to your club beyond just the capital campaign. That's really important. So this is again a letter that went out during the Lake Country Soccer. That's in Springfield, Missouri. We're raising $15 million there. And good news, up to that amount actually will be given through the American Rescue Plan by local governments, both city and county. Why? Because we did an economic impact analysis that demonstrated to city council and the county what would occur economically in terms of revenue that would come to local businesses and taxes that would come to the city if in fact the entire facility, 13 fields, 12 in a stadium and an indoor facility, were renovated at once. And they were stunned. And so they're investing, as I mentioned, up to $15 million. $5 million has already been allocated, and we're currently, they just selected the architect last week, and now we're obviously going to take whatever design they propose and then get on to contractors. It's pretty exciting. So this is a classic letter. Again, this was a $10,000 gift. I think it was done by an insurance, SRC Holdings, which is, I think, an insurance company. Anyway, standard letter, and from Ryan, who's a board member. And the reason why we had Ryan do it is because he's a business partner with this guy, and so that makes sense. And the executive director also wrote a letter. So the next slide, a transformational gift is exactly what I just discussed, right? It's getting a gift like $5 million, right, which takes care of everything essentially that you weren't really counting on. We saw that with San Francisco Elite Academy 4 years ago, where they got a $500,000 gift from a foundation over 5 years. So $100,000 a year that they had no idea was going to come in the door. So that transformed their ability to move other monies around, pay their coaches more, get the best coaches, et cetera. I've got a ton of examples, but those are two recent ones. So they do happen. And actually, we just got another one with another client in Northern California, where it could be up to 40 million. It really depends on which project we go with. In this case, if you ever get that kind of a gift, then you take it seriously, because there's more money, generally speaking, particularly if it's a foundation. So there's ongoing personal updates. If it's a naming rights situation, that could be transformational. That's really important. And then lifelong stewardship. Make sure that you're constantly, broadly communicating and honoring the gift in perpetuity, for sure. So conclusions. Stewardship is the fundamental backbone of all development, best business practices. That's where agencies differentiate from one another. And the better you do it, the happier your members are going to be, your business sponsors are going to be, everyone. In terms of high net worth families, there are 7 types. And by the way, none are offended if you ask them for too much money, not one. Here are the 7 types. The communitarian, they think that doing good makes sense. So these are just common sense people that are good community people. Devout, doing good is God's will. Those are the tithers on Sunday. The investor, doing good is good business, return on investment. The socialite, right? Doing good is fun. That's how they get their fun out. The altruist, doing good feels right. The repayer is generally somebody who benefited from some kind of philanthropy growing up, and so they're doing good in return. We see that a lot in university independent for people who benefited from getting a financial aid award. And so then when they've done well financially themselves, they turn around and set up funds in that area so that other kids can benefit. That's the most we see the repairs, and it makes sense. And then the last one, think Rockefellers or Bill Gates and his family, or Warren Buffett, the dynasts, right? That's what they do. It's a family tradition. They talk about giving at, pretty much every other weekend. And many of them have foundations, family foundations, or family offices where that occurs. And those are increasing, by the way, in terms of, because there's so much money being produced right now, a lot of foundations are being set up. And I would be not surprised if within your club, several families actually had such foundations or donor advised funds within community foundations doing that. And lastly, again, this is the way to differentiate yourself, right? Whether it's doing stewardship with your business sponsors, your naming rights sponsors, etc. It's going to set you apart if you do it really well. So evaluate, assess, and make sure you're doing the things we talked about today. Mel, back to you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. What's the best way to manage stewardship data?
Okay, that's a great question. And we have good news here. There's a product on the market if you're a 501c3, a nonprofit, called Salesforce. And you can get up to 8 licenses for free. And it's arguably the best customer relationship management product or donor management system out there. And it speaks to a lot of other systems like QuickBooks and things like that. Again, Salesforce, nonprofit product. And just talk to Mel if you have any questions about how to get set up, because we do that literally every other day for our clients. Great question.
Great, thanks. And the second one is, what if a donor says they're busy and they don't want to be updated?
Yeah, that happens. It actually just happened with one of our donor foundations where we were doing this quarterly report, and the client, she's an attorney, the executive director. She tends to be a little bit too verbose, And so she sent the quarterly report, but it was like 6 pages and way too much, where we try and be very succinct. Somehow it got through the cracks, right, without us checking it. And the foundation representative came back and said, I really appreciate all this information, but candidly, I don't have the time to read it. So in the future, very nicely, he said, don't bother. So yeah, you need to honor their wishes, okay? And so if you know somebody doesn't want that quarterly, then you don't do it. You just do the formal FBIN thank you, and that's it. But generally, it's rare. That was actually the first instance in a long time, but it just happened up in Oregon. It's funny. Great question.
All right. Thanks, Rob, for your time today. We really appreciate it. And thanks, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar and for this series. We'll be sure to send a recording of the webinar out within the next 24 hours. And you'll also be able to find it on the Tennessee soccer platform on the Cogeo website, along with other resources and easy ways to communicate with Cogeo. Before we sign off and wrap up this series, if your club is interested in implementing any of the tactics and methods that we've covered over the past few months, we'd love to help you do so. We have a range of ways that you can partner with Cogeo and launch your own fundraising campaign. So if you're interested, please reach out through our site or the contact info that's on these slides, and we'll be sure to set up a meeting with you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.